You began your journey of self-discovery in a moment of silent desperation, an internal struggle you tried to hide from others and even from yourself. Each attempt to maintain control, to present a version of yourself that would be accepted and admired by others, only drained your energy and suppressed your truest essence. But something within you began to stir, something that pushed you out of that facade. With every effort to remain unyielding, you started to notice that something essential was being lost, and in that void, you found yourself confronted with your own vulnerability. It was at that moment that something shifted within you. Vulnerability, that weakness that had once seemed like a threat, unexpectedly became the key to your liberation. By allowing yourself to be who you truly were, you began to feel a growing strength that you had not known before. The realization that by opening up to others, you were not exposing yourself to pain, but opening yourself up to true freedom. The mask and the courage to remove it. What is a mask if not an attempt to hide the truth, a facade built on fear and insecurity? For a long time you wore that mask, believing it would protect you, but deep down you knew it was a prison, not a shield. The feeling of being disconnected, of being incomplete, of being distant from everything and everyone, that shadowed you every day. You realized that by maintaining this facade, the feeling of being true and genuine was slowly fading away. With each small lie you told, not to others but to yourself, it became harder to look in the mirror and recognize who you really were. It was then that courage began to emerge. The courage to look at yourself without filters, without judgments. The courage to accept that the fragility you possess is merely a reflection of your humanity. The process of removing the mask wasn't easy. It involved pain, rejection, and the fear of being misunderstood. But at the same time, with each piece you removed, each layer that fell away, you felt stronger. Vulnerability, which once seemed like a burden, began to be recognized as a true strength. For the first time, you were brave enough to show the world who you really are. Transforming fear into strength. The fear of being vulnerable, of being real, of being imperfect, it was still there, whispering in your mind, trying to convince you that it wasn't worth it. But you realized this fear no longer had control. It no longer dictated the rules. Instead of imprisoning you, fear became an ally, a reminder that you were walking in uncharted and courageous territory. The fear of being rejected began to transform into the courage to be accepted for who you truly were. Each time you revealed yourself to the world, without filters, without cover-ups, you discovered that the acceptance you sought didn't come from others' approval but from your own acceptance. Vulnerability ceased to be seen as weakness and was redefined as an act of courage. The strength of vulnerability. In this section, you begin to realize that vulnerability is not something to be feared or avoided. On the contrary, it has become a skill, a superpower. Being vulnerable in front of others, without the fear of judgment, has become the foundation of your deepest and most genuine relationships. You've come to understand that strength does not lie in perfection, but in the ability to show your humanity, to connect on a deeper level. Every time you shared a weakness, you felt more understood. Each time you opened up, something inside you healed. Authenticity ceased to be a burden and became your greatest ally. Redefining genuine relationships. When you started to realize that being true was in fact an act of bravery, something profound changed within you. Every relationship you built from this place of authenticity grew stronger. It was no longer about maintaining appearances or pleasing others. It was about being yourself. And that became the foundation of a real connection, free from games or unrealistic expectations. Authenticity began to transform the way you interacted with those around you. Friends, partners, colleagues. Everyone started to see that you were no longer a person hiding behind a facade. You were a whole human being with flaws, strengths, light and shadows. And this wholeness was, in fact, what drew people closer to you. The vulnerability you displayed was not seen as a weakness, but as an invitation to a deeper and more meaningful relationship. The courage to be authentic in love. In love, authenticity proved to be even more transformative. You realized that by being true to yourself, your capacity to love and be loved expanded. There was no longer room for falseness or compromises with expectations of perfection. Love for you is now seen as a fertile ground where you can be exactly who you are without the fear of rejection or misunderstanding. And so, you begin to realize that by allowing yourself to be vulnerable, you are creating a deeper connection, not just with others, but with yourself as well. When you look at another person with an open heart and without masks, you not only convey sincerity, but also invite the other person to do the same. This creates a space where authenticity meets, flourishes, and builds lasting relationships. Overcoming the fear of rejection. Before you understood that vulnerability was your strength, you feared rejection. The worry of being misunderstood, of not being enough, was always lurking. But you realized that by being genuine, the fear of rejection didn't disappear. Rather, it gained a new perspective. When you present yourself authentically, those who reject you are not rejecting you as a person, but rather the version of yourself that you tried to project. From this understanding, the fear of rejection was neutralized. Now true rejection no longer affects you in the same way. What you've come to see is that by being true to yourself, you protect yourself in ways that are much more powerful than simply trying to please others. You realize that protecting yourself truly means being authentic, with all that it entails. Vulnerability as a call to transformation. By showing your vulnerability, you not only inspire others to do the same, but you also place yourself on a path of constant transformation. Each moment of courage to show up as your true self takes you deeper into your process of self-discovery and growth. And you understand that vulnerability is not a permanent state of fragility, but a dynamic movement of continuous growth. What you have discovered is that instead of weakening you, vulnerability is, in fact, the gateway to your true strength. You have become a braver, more open person, more capable of fully facing life's imperfections. This places you in a unique position of power, the strength that comes from authenticity, transforming your professional and personal life. Your vulnerability has not only transformed your personal relationships, but it has also impacted your professional life. You realized that by being authentic and true to yourself at work, you attracted opportunities that once seemed unattainable. Authenticity became your distinguishing factor. People started to see you not as someone who is afraid to make mistakes, but as someone brave enough to be vulnerable, learn from their mistakes, and grow. Your vulnerability has turned into leadership and inspiration. It has become the fuel for your continuous evolution. The balance between strength and fragility. Throughout this journey, you realize that being vulnerable is not an act of weakness, but of balance. You came to understand that instead of viewing vulnerability as a flaw, it is simply one of the facets of a complex and complete human being. True strength comes from the harmony between fragility and resilience, between the courage to be imperfect and the wisdom to learn from life's challenges. Conclusion: the superpower of authenticity. Today, you look back and see a journey of transformation. Vulnerability, which once seemed like a weakness, has become your greatest strength. Your authenticity has become your superpower. And now, instead of hiding, you shine, not for perfection, but for the courage to be who you truly are, your true essence. And in doing so, you somehow illuminate the paths of others as well. With this, you have not only transformed your life, but also the world around you. The impact of your authenticity is profound. It touches people's hearts and invites them to do the same, to free themselves from their masks and live with more courage and truth. For you realize that true strength lies not in hiding, but in showing up in all your fullness. You realized, deep down, that the act of showing vulnerability, instead of making you weaker, was merely revealing your true strength. As you stripped away the layers of masks, your wounds, your imperfections, your shadows, were now seen not as something to be feared, but as a masterpiece that you began to understand and even admire. Vulnerability, as you've always known, is uncharted territory, and the fear of stepping into it is one of the greatest challenges everyone faces. That fear that whispered, urging you to hide, to protect yourself, to remain in the dark. But you, who felt deep inside the unbearable need to be free, understood that you could only achieve true freedom by surrendering to the unknown. That was the key, the moment of transition, realizing that fear was no longer your enemy but a companion on the journey. Fear, in fact, was the signal that you were headed in the right direction. It shouldn't paralyze you anymore, but rather propel you forward. And with each step, you began to realize that the journey back to yourself was filled with invisible internal victories. Your courage in taking off the mask was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face the raw reality of your existence. You saw that by allowing yourself to be imperfect, by permitting yourself to fail, by revealing your fragility, there was a transformative energy emanating from the depths of you. By being true, you realized that true acceptance does not come from outside, but from within. When you accepted yourself unconditionally, what remained was a whole being, full of power. Not a power of conquest or control, but the power to be who you really are without apologies. This new way of being made those around you perceive the light you emanate. And it wasn't a light you forced. It was a light that arose from your authenticity, something that couldn't be imitated or forged. When you began to be who you truly are transparently, people started to connect with your soul, not with the superficial version you had tried to maintain for so long. You connected with them in a way that once seemed impossible. Gradually, you realized that by revealing yourself, you invited others to do the same. Every word you spoke, every gesture, every glance, everything was imbued with a depth that only those who allow themselves to be vulnerable can express. The strength of vulnerability isn't in being perfect, but in being human. And by being human, you opened doors to a communication that touched the hearts of those who listened to you, who saw you. Over time, you realized that this silent, often invisible strength was more powerful than any shield you could have created. You were connected to the essence of what it means to be authentic, to live without pretensions, without expectations other than your own, without the need to please, to conform to what the world expects. Your sense of worth no longer came from outside, but from within. You understood that the greatest gift you could offer to others and to yourself was your true presence. It was in this awakening that you recognized the greatness of your journey. What once seemed a burden was now a blessing. Your vulnerability became the foundation upon which you rebuilt your life. Every fragment of you that had been broken and reshaped became a precious piece, now forming a unique work of art, your life. And it was more alive and more vibrant than ever. If you ever feared making mistakes, the new realization is that a mistake is not the end. A mistake is just another step along the way. Failure does not define you, but it teaches you. You've learned to get up from your falls without shame, without hiding, because you understand that each stumble is a reflection of your courage to keep moving forward, even without knowing what the future holds. In love, this new understanding of yourself has resonated. The ability to love yourself unconditionally, to look at yourself with deep acceptance, has made you ready to embrace a form of genuine love. No longer the love that demands perfection, but the one that sees beauty in imperfection. That love that does not tire, that does not hide, that is not afraid. And by opening yourself to this love, you've also given others the permission to love you without reservations, to see you as a complete and wholly deserving being, regardless of any flaws. In your professional life, you've also realized the power of vulnerability. Your authenticity, which you once feared to expose, has now become your greatest strength. You've come to understand that by being true to what you do, doors begin to open. The path of leadership, influence, and personal fulfillment is paved by the courage to be yourself. When you started to be transparent, you stopped being someone who tried to fit into molds and became someone who builds their own path with security and confidence. And so, your journey continues. Not with the promise that you won't face difficulties again, but with the certainty that your vulnerability is now an endless source of strength. You've come to realize that the fear you had of being vulnerable was, in fact, the key to your true freedom. What once seemed like fragility has become power. What once appeared to be an obstacle has become a bridge. You've understood that by embracing your humanity, by recognizing that fragility is part of who you are, you become stronger, more connected, and more authentic. Now, when you look at yourself, you no longer feel ashamed of your vulnerability. You smile at it, knowing that it's what makes you unique. Your courage to be authentic is what defines you. It's not about what you have or what you've done, but who you truly are. Vulnerability is now your ally, and you know with every cell of your being that your authenticity is the greatest gift you can offer the world. By allowing yourself to be who you are, you enable others to do the same. And together, everyone can walk towards a fuller, deeper, and more genuine life. You've reached the point of realizing that true strength lies not in perfection, but in the total acceptance of who we are, human beings in constant evolution. Today, as you look at yourself, there's no longer any space for doubt. There is only the certainty that the true beauty of life lies in living authentically, with courage and without regrets. The journey of self-discovery never ends. It's a constant cycle of growth, acceptance, and transformation, But what you have realized above all is that vulnerability is not a burden to be carried, but a superpower to be honored. And by living with this awareness, you become the best version of yourself. And that, my friend, is just the beginning.